Hello, my name is Elizabeth McPherson, and my presentation is on the idolization of the male body in 19th century boxing. Boxing was one of the first major sports in America, and despite its close connection to the degeneracy and gambling of the sporting fraternity, it was popular from the start with the lower working classes and steadily became popular with white-collar workers and higher-class Victorians. Bare-knuckle boxing had been relatively popular in England well before the 19th century, coming to prominence in America around the 1780s. In 1792, Daniel Mendoza of England would write The Art of Boxing, which was an instructional manual on tips to do well in the ring with properly placed parries and blocking along with a small set of rules. In the early 1820s and 30s, prize fighting was illegal but widespread and the subject of much public consternation on these fights to the finish, with New York City, of course, being the hub of fighting activity. This popularity was furthered by William Porter's publication of The Spirit of the Times in 1831, which would cover a slew of sporting activities, but especially prize fights. This would further the popularity of boxing, allowing it to gain wider prominence by the end of that decade. The formative years of American prize fighting would come in the mid-1800s with the rise of Yankee Sullivan and other such stars of the ring. However, in 1842, prize fighting hit a snag with the death of Thomas McCoy in his bout against Christopher Lilly. Despite this short setback, boxing would again regain its footing and by the 1870s be accepted by the upper classes with the manly art of self-defense in sparring gyms for well-to-do men looking to regain their masculinity through exercise. This trend of popularity lasted through the 1880s, yet sadly by the close of the decade, the end of bare-knuckle boxing would occur in 1892, with the bout between champion Yankee Sullivan and gentleman Jim Corbett. Throughout boxing's rise, the impact of newspaper articles was vital, in both retelling the drama of the bout and allowing a larger audience to vicariously be part of the action. Newspaper articles spread the hype of prize fighting to anyone who would read them. 1830s publications, such as The Spirit of the Times, would write of the redeeming virtues of boxing, claiming a feeling of proud courage and manly self-defense from fighting, with the rules of boxing giving the sport a sense of righteous virtue as a man protected his honor in the sacred circle of the ring. These newspaper articles from the first half of the 1800s paid special attention to the state of the bodies of the fighters. These fighters were presented as beautifully built, with extreme detail accorded to their muscular structure and the glint in their eyes, making the newspaper seem almost in love with the fighters. The fighters strip off their shirts to display their forms, exciting the crowd as they do so. The audience sees perfection in these men through the display of their bodies. Boxing could be seen as a very homoerotic sport, given these descriptions and the focus on the physicality of the fighters, with the fight itself being a form of male-to-male masochistic foreplay, with the winner deemed the true man while the loser is emasculated. In the ring, physical perfection and admiration are countered by destruction, with the intimacy and sensuality of physical contact being paired with violence. The Victorian era saw mass urbanization and modernization in cities, which led to many higher-class males afraid of losing their masculinity due to white-collar office jobs and no longer having to, by hand, tame the land. Here, physical exercise began to be seen as paired with masculinity and would later give form to the muscular Christianity movement of spiritual health being linked to physical well-being. During the 19th century, the male body was a symbol of masculinity and power. The body was able to have cultural ideas ascribed to it, with fights able to symbolize the shifting power balance between ethnicities or the achievement of masculinity over femininity. Boxers were able to be seen as a vital counterweight to the growing number of sedentary jobs in the late 19th century. Pairing with the growth of commodified capitalism, the bodies of boxers were also a form of physical capital, demonstrating the vitality of their race and culture. This capital could then be bought by spectators with their ticket fee for the fight. Middle-class men who would not participate in the fights could still achieve a sense of pride and manliness when spectating the fight and participating in a voyeuristic pleasure for the display of masculinity in front of him. The boxer with his well-developed frame from the efforts of extreme self-discipline was the apex of manhood. Boxers were paragons of individualistic virtue, as they were perceived to have their own agency and control over their careers, unlike many men who were now part of a corporate machine. 1880s writings further demonstrating the idolization of the male boxer's body were published, such as Charles Clay claiming the boxer's well-conditioned and beautiful body is an erotic blazon and what a grand and wonderful piece of mechanism man truly is. The boxer is again seen as a form of industry, with his muscles creating a mechanized output akin to factories in the cities. The boxer was a human form demonstrating the effectiveness of urban mechanisms. As boxing spread in popularity to the upper classes through the acceptance of some fights and with the creation of boxing gyms focusing on the manly art of self-defense, healthy bodies were further seen to be the harbors of middle-class Victorian values of discipline, self-control, structure, and controlled aggression of the male body. The sweet science of manly sparring became commonplace for middle-class men who learned from boxing professors of the sport. By the 1880s, many boxing manuals and articles were published to keep up with the demand of the middle class to be physically fit. Sparring and physical fitness became a way to hold off the fear of a rising underclass and maintain social distinctions through manly reassurance. Men could protect themselves if they maintained their bodies as their minds. By the late 19th century, prize fights and championships would be held in secret locations and attended by thousands of fans from nearly all social classes. Despite the continued gambling that took place at these exhibitions, the main object of the crowd's affections was the muscularity and masculinity of the fighters. The spectacle of the men fighting was an art enjoyed by a large proportion of the populace, and even after their fights and careers, many fighters, such as Yankee Sullivan, would tour the vaudeville circuit for the express purpose of showing off their bodies for pay-to-view. In conclusion, boxing, sparring, and prize fighting were all a demonstration of manly strength, agility, and control, which was greatly enjoyed by voyeuristic onlookers. The fights in the ring were a symbol of a man's journey to fight against the wild, urban life, and for himself. Boxing was a demonstration of the strenuous life as a cure to growing femininity in modern culture, and pugilists became heroes of all classes in an art painted in blood. Thank you very much.